next week we have Travis and John Nichols teaching on the Holy Spirit, which I'm looking forward to as a former Pentecostal. I have lots of questions. I feel like I'm still learning about the Holy Spirit. But I thought it would be good to spend this time going over General Assembly. Pete and I were there, and Ty. And so some churches, Presbyterian churches, don't really tell their churches what happens. They have maybe a perception that people aren't really so interested in it, and maybe that's true. Our church, I think, is a little bit more interested and aware of things going on in the denomination, but I also feel like it's a way to steward what you have entrusted us to do. So the church pays for us to go to General Assembly. It is not cheap. And I think it takes, that means I have a big responsibility. When I'm there, I'm supposed to really just do one thing: vote. Go to my committees, be involved, vote on their decisions, vote at General Assembly, enter into debate, all these types of things. So unfortunately, I was commenting to Amanda, this year was the largest attended General Assembly we've ever had. We had, I think the final number for voting commissioners was close to 2,400, maybe 23 something. So that's just the ruling elders and teaching elders that could vote. Add in lots of family, exhibitors, staff people for various permanent boards. I mean, we were probably pushing or over 5,000 people in Chattanooga. And you can ask Amanda, everywhere you went in Chattanooga for this week, you bumped into multiple PCA pastors or staff members or people affiliated with it. So that was great. But one of the things I noticed while we vote, we keep a tally of all the votes coming in, and there would be times where we would barely get 1,200. And you look around the room, and it's because that many men were gone from the room. Now they come back for the really important votes, but I can attest to this. It's better for us, since you've paid for us to go there, to try to stay for all the things, for all the votes. They all matter. It's kind of like this is part of our job. Pete is dead serious about this, man. I mean, there are some committees that I will say, I'm trusting them. They can give us a report. There's nothing controversial. I may pop out to the exhibit hall to see a friend. First GA I ever went to with Pete, I did exactly that. And Pete looked at me like this. He goes, "If you feel like you want to do that." And man, I tell you, it froze me. I was like, I haven't seen this person in 8 years. Yeah, I'm going to do it. But he just shook his head. Jeff Gleason shook his head twice at me. But I was using the bathroom. But Jeff was for certain thinking that I was leaving. So just some things to go over from this year's assembly. If you want, and I'll find a way to get this out, I'll probably share it on our church's Facebook page. Our denominational magazine, By Faith, always prints a summary of all the major things that happened at the General Assembly. It'll go through each and every single overture. I'm not doing that because we had 50, and that takes a lot of time, and we voted on over 20 of them in omnibus, which means we just said, here's this whole group. The committee recommends to vote this way. We're just going to do that, so we could spend time debating the ones worth debating. But there are a couple of big things that happened this year. The first is our stated clerk changed people. So the stated clerk, it's a delicate way of putting that. So our stated clerk, so every court of the church has a clerk. So our session has a clerk. Mr. David Little, he's an excellent clerk. In fact, I may make a motion next meeting to make it an indefinite position. Second, yeah, there we go. Boom, so ordered. So they're just tasked with compiling minutes, correcting us on parliamentary procedure. I mean, this is usually the pinnacle of Presbyterian nerdiness. I mean, if you want this job, you are really asking for a service leadership role. It's very germane. So the session has a clerk, our presbytery has a clerk, and to brag on him, his name is Glenn Dyer. He is a ruling elder at I believe it's Christ Church in Evans, Georgia. And what happens is when the presbyteries, when they compile their minutes, they send it up to General Assembly to be reviewed. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So their work gets reviewed by over 85 men over the course of 2 days. And there's always a little issue, right? So they're looking at these minutes. Maybe they forgot to fully give an explanation for why a presbytery did an action. or maybe there's more serious issues. And so most presbyteries, they get a little ding for something. When I was a clerk, I got dinged because I didn't list out all the exams of a guy that transferred into the presbytery. Not the end of the world. I just apologize and resubmit them. Our presbytery, 0. We were flawless. It was wonderful. It's extra wonderful if you're the clerk, because if you do mess up and it's bigger, it may end up that the entire General Assembly gets to hear about it and then debate it. So the stated clerk of our assembly, though, is a big deal. So they are not a president, they're not a pope, but they are tasked with helping maintain unity and order across all the denominations. So if you have an issue, even at the session level, with, hey, we're struggling with how to adjudicate something or how to do a process of discipline against a church member, we actually don't know what to do, you call up the bat phone. You call up Atlanta, you leave a message for the stated clerk, who has been Brian Chappell, and Brian Chappell will call you back, or one of his parliamentarians, within sometimes a couple hours, sometimes 24 hours, and they'll be able to help guide you. They're also kind of de facto the person who would respond to inquiries. For example, a few years ago, when the Presbyterian Church United States of America started to approve LGBTQ pastors, a Washington Post story ran, the Presbyterian Church in America approves LGBTQ pastors. The person we entrusted to correct them was the office of the stated clerk, who wrote to the Washington Post and said, not our circus, not our monkeys, or whatever it is. So he corrected them. That's pretty much the end of his power. Well, Brian Chappell has been the clerk for about 5 years. He's a really gifted leader, communicator. Is everyone familiar with that name, Brian Chappell? Some head nods. We were. So he was the president of Covenant Seminary while Amanda and I were there. He's written probably the most read book on preaching in the United States within the 21st century. He was the pastor to 2 of our members. So he's been the stated clerk for 5 years, and while he is, I think, a man of good character and very gifted, he has had a string over the past 4 years of just blunders. Poor judgment decisions that kind of culminated in a really bad judgment decision during a podcast. And Pete and I, on our podcast, actually go into at-length detail about this. So if you want more information, pull up that podcast. It's one of the very recent ones. We go through the whole brouhaha. I'm not going to go through it now because, case in point, it was so bad that within a few days, Brian Chappell alerted the administrative committee, which is what who he serves under, and said, I'm going to retire. I can't come back from this. It's clear the whole body is pretty much mad at me. And so he did request to speak to the assembly. So he's no longer the stated clerk. We have an interim right now. But he did give an address. It did remind me a little bit of like a politician making an apology, because his wife came up with him, which I thought was sweet. So his wife's right behind him. He gave a very gracious apology and kind of statement, admitting where he failed, how he can see that. But he really did end thinking of the denomination. So he ended on a very high, encouraging note. The whole assembly, I haven't spoke to a single guy that was like, it was a bunch of garbage. It was a very sincere apology. So he's no longer the stated clerk. We will vote on a new one at the next assembly while they search for it. Some positives, though, from the stated clerk's report. We are one of 2 denominations in the country that are growing. Every other Christian denomination in the United States is not. So it's us and the Assemblies of God. Y'all, I don't know what is happening, but we are the only 2 denominations in the United States that are going. This year we hit something, I forget how we phrased this, I think called like the Magic Fives, but this is pretty cool. In 2024, we had 5,000 new professions of faith. That means 5,000 people who had never professed faith in Christ in PCA churches. We had 5,000 covenant children profess faith. And then we had 5,000 infant baptisms. So we've seen a lot of good fruit. We're continuing to grow. That's all from the stated clerk.
Back to the clerk thing. If there's not another one until they decide next year, what are they doing?
What a wonderful question, young lady. That was condescending. All right, what a question! Wonderful question. So we have an interim who is named John Bice. John served as our moderator 3 presbyteries ago. He also has served as an interim clerk before, so he's very knowledgeable. So he is currently filling that role. In all likelihood, it's probably going to a man named Fred Greco. I'm putting this out there and hoping that he listens to me. He's not going to, so I can get away with saying this. Fred was our moderator at our 50th General Assembly. The joke within the PCA is he does his morning devotions after the Bible in the Book of Church Order. In fact, so that's what we'll do. So right now we have an interim. All the questions go to John Bice. So when Fred was moderator, and even this year, Fred is very tactful at getting to the microphone of the assembly and helping the moderators get out of a sticky situation without coming off as telling them how to actually do their job. But we do have a moderator who runs the meeting. That's the end of their power. Again, each of our churches and courts have this. So Pete, by default, is our moderator at the session. We elect a moderator at the presbytery who serves for, I think, 1 year. And the same thing with the General Assembly. And at the presbytery level and General Assembly level, we alternate. So 1 year it's a ruling elder, 1 year it's a teaching elder. So last year was a ruling elder. This year was supposed to be a teaching elder. And this year's moderator was Kevin DeYoung. Does everybody know that name? Opening night of worship, he was sitting across the aisle, and Amanda leaned over to me, and she goes, "That guy looks really familiar." And I was like, "It's Kevin DeYoung." She goes, "Oh, yeah, okay." Kevin was amazing as a ruling elder. I don't know if it was his Dutch efficiency, but he kept our meeting moving. He was humorous and did a master class of leading the assembly. So also, usually there's a couple like nominees for moderator, and when everyone found out it was Kevin DeYoung, nobody threw their hat in. They're like, that's not going to work out well. So he is our moderator until next General Assembly. So what does he do in the interim? Not a whole lot. He's really only empowered when we gather as the assembly. Some churches and presbyteries may invite him to come speak as the moderator for this year, to give a vision for the PCA or to explain something, but that's it. He can't unilaterally do anything on our behalf because his power is limited to just running our assembly. All right, now we're getting into the good stuff. So I'm going to go through some of these things, and then I'm going to pause to have any questions, and also to make sure you haven't fallen asleep.
And the other aspect is he's giving up his vote to be the moderator, but the moderator...
Not at General Assembly. The moderator gets to vote. He can't speak. Actually, the moderator always gets to vote. Okay. That was funny. So we all have these clickers that are really high tech. They never work properly. This year we had a whole huge thing because one of the channels for the radio receivers got messed up, so like 1,000 guys' votes weren't recorded. So we're ironing all this out, but you could clearly see several times which way the moderator was voting, just on the way he placed his hand and trying to point it, because he's facing all of us. So somebody at some point corrected him, because like by the next day he's doing this number while he votes to make sure. Yeah, you know, like you're like, I can see both sides of it. Let me just wait and see what Kevin does. Like that's not supposed to happen. Okay, so what on earth do we do at General Assembly? Does anybody know? Vote on stuff. What kinds of stuff do we vote on? Overtures is the big one, but we vote on lots of things. So we have something called, we have two special committees of the assembly: the nominating and RPR. This is Review of Presbytery Records. So these two are made up of commissioners voted on by their presbyteries. They're special because they have to meet before we even gather, so that their reports are ready the second we start deliberating about things. So the nominating committee is pretty obvious. They're tasked with recommending nominations for our permanent committees. So this is like MTW, Mission to North America, RUF, Covenant College, Covenant Seminary, Interchurch Relations, Geneva Benefits, Christian Discipleship Ministries, and I think there's one more. So each of those boards have to have a ruling elder or teaching elder serve on them. They have tons of staff working underneath them, but they have to be given oversight from the assembly. They have to be an ordained officer, so it's our task with putting men on those boards. So it's the nominating committee's task with receiving those nominations and then presenting them to the assembly to vote on. Oftentimes, so this year we had 35 positions that need to be filled across our boards. The nominating committee presents a report saying, here's who we recommend for every position. And it gives a detailed thing. We don't have to always listen to that report. We can, as an assembly, say, I know some of these guys, I don't think they're the right fit. So we can do floor recommendations. Now you have to submit them in a certain amount of time. But this year, we had 35 positions open. I forget, I think we had 31, I may be messing up, floor nominations. So what does this tell you, as little that you may know about polity here? What might that message send to the nominating committee?
You guys did a terrible job.
You guys may not have done the best job. And that is, I'm not going to say true, but that was the perception. So the nominating committee's roster of people this year, the larger assembly felt came from heavily one side of the PCA. So all of these floor nominees represented other points of view and other expressions of the PCA. Of those 31 floor nominees, I think, and again, I had the numbers on a different paper that I forgot to print out. We still went with the majority of what the nominating committee recommended, but we did approve 9 floor nominees for some of the votes. One of them, I was sitting next to the guy because he's a friend of mine. He won his position by 7 votes. 881 for the other guy, 887, or so 6 votes for my friend.
Which side of the PCA were they from?
So this side, that's my hope, was associated with kind of the not political theme, but there's no other way to a more progressive, broad evangelical side came from these nominees. So from like the middle of that to like people that, you know, kind of totter either way, but overwhelmingly that way. The floor nominees came from a more conservative to center-right side. And usually, like, there are still guys that, and then mixtures. Like, there were some people there, I had no idea. A friend told them to do it, and they threw their name out there, and they got like 5 votes. So it in years past, we haven't had to do this because no matter where you fall on the spectrum of the PCA, you saw people in here where you're like, oh, that's a good fit. It's the nominating committee usually is very influential, but we often just accept their report and then we have to vote on it, and it's almost just procedural, like you get your chance. This year there was enough disagreement within the assembly that 9 guys from the floor nominees got voted. Most of them were close, some of them were landslides. Like Ligon Duncan was a floor nominee. He crushed the nominating committee recommendation because Ligon was better equipped.
So at the 35, where do they pull those numbers? So you said there's a process to be allowed to be a nominee from the floor. Are those names the same names that the nomination committee has?
It could have been, so it could have been somebody that submitted so you have to be nominated. So like at Presbytery, you're like, hey, we have a permanent committee opening this year to serve on Covenant College's board. Does anybody want to take it? Nobody from our Presbytery wants it, then we don't send up a name. But let's say David Sage wants to do it that year. We would say, do we think David's a good guy to do it? We'd vote. Yeah, we like David. Give it a shot. We type up a bio. We send it to the nominating committee. They deliberate 2 months before the assembly meets. If they're like, hey, this David Sage guy from Savannah River Presbytery, he's all right. We think he could get on the board. He could do some good things at Covenant. He would make the report. But let's say he's one of 15 nominees for Covenant College and there's one spot. The nominating committee may go, David's never been to Lookout Mountain, Georgia, wasn't a graduate of Covenant College, and so we're not going to go with him. We've got an alum from Covenant College who's spent all this time networking and giving Covenant students jobs and really invested. We're going to go with that one. David could be upset, and I could be upset because I want David on the board, so then I could put him as a floor nomination. And so the difference is when you put those out there, there's not a committee saying, no, you can't do that. So
Yeah.
like one thing had like 3 or 4 floor nominations from 4, trying to compete for it. But this part is the part that gets the most vetted, is who the nominees are received from the presbyteries.
So the nomination committee gets nominees from
Presbytery.
presbyteries, and then from the floor, someone makes a motion to have David considered and somebody seconds it now.
So not even that thorough. It really is. You could just be like, I think I could do a better job, or I think David could do a better job. You just have to fill out a form and get it to the nominating committee. I think the day it meets at General Assembly. So that's the unique nature of floor nominees. They don't have to go through this process, which you could also then say is maybe a little skeptical of floor nominees. So some people got really mad
But
that
the floor nomination has to be vetted by their session, essentially. Not session, their presbytery.
Nope.
Is their name.
this is completely independent. This is, I think, I've seen who the nominee is, and I think so-and-so could do a better job. Now, it can't just be like, I didn't talk to David at all, and I throw his name in front of the General Assembly. Like, David has to be willing to serve if I'm going to put it forward.
Yesterday you talked to me, he's willing, and you put his name up.
Yeah, that's how easy it is.
Wow.
So that's why it's a bit, you gotta have a pretty good reason to put up a floor nominee. Some people got really mad that there were so many. I think it's part of our polity. It is saying, hey, we just think this year's slate was a little all over the map. We want to give some balance. And however many floor nominees it actually was, we only took 9 out of the 35 positions that needed to be filled. So that still means overwhelmingly it went to nominating committee.
How far in advance does the committee put forth their nominees? Like, how long do you have to consider nominating someone else?
So to nominate somebody else,
Are you saying their slates, the 35,
Yeah, the
the
35.
slates?
like how long in advance do you know there's an opening?
No,
How many
no,
have they
no.
selected?
They're
Slate
people
of
that you
35.
find out that they're-
Gotcha. We find out pretty close right before General Assembly meets. That's why they have to meet early to deliberate, and then we get our commissioner's handbook, and we find out who the name's in there. So the commissioner's handbook usually comes out just a couple weeks before, maybe 3 weeks before. So you quickly look through those, and you're like, oh, I think Lig and Duncan could do a better job. So I'm gonna talk to Lig about it, and I speak about these big names very informally. Lig and Duncan has no idea who I am, but I'm gonna call him Lig. All right, so that's. Any other questions about nominating committee? I didn't think so. RPR is our special second committee. I'm going to move through this a lot faster because Robert's already twinkling in bye-bye land. You soaking it all in? So there's 87 presbyteries. This one will be probably more interesting, believe it or not. There's 87 presbyteries in the Presbyterian Church in America. We have to submit our Presbyterian minutes to the General Assembly every year for review. So I hope you're picking something up here with like this. These are review and control. What makes our polity so important, so safeguarded, is we constantly are having higher courts review lower courts. Our session minutes are reviewed by our presbytery, and then we hear back about it. Our presbytery records are reviewed by a committee of the commissioners, RPR, who then sends it to the General Assembly, who then finally says, okay, you guys are good this year. So why is this so important? So RPR catches all sorts of things. They catch gross unconstitutional maneuvers. So let's say there is a church, this actually happened. So a church in the former presbytery, a year ago we were 88. This is why this committee is important. There used to be 88 presbyteries. One of them was Columbus Metro Presbytery in Columbus, Ohio. Doesn't exist anymore. Part of the reason it doesn't exist anymore was a gross abuse of the presbytery's power to dissolve a PCA church without the representation of the church and then seize the church's assets. One of the most persuasive floor speeches in GA history came as the time was running out during an RPR report about what to do with this presbytery, and one of my friends got up with seconds left on the topic discussion and just said, seized assets, because that was the line that RPR highlighted, and that was it. So all that got caught because they recorded everything, because we're Presbyterian. So they just thought they recorded it in such a way as it would blow past RPR. Instead, it gets all sorts of things flagged for procedural motions, non-representation of the church, local, all these things. That's one level. It reviews stated differences with our confession that are made by candidates for ministry. So when a teaching elder is being ordained or transferred in the presbytery, he has to let us know where he disagrees with the confession, which we allow, but he has to put it in writing. So sometimes it's just as simple as, hey, you said a guy took a state of difference. We don't have it in writing. You even gave the decision. That's fine. We just need it in writing. Other times, they give us the state of difference written down. They tell us how they rule, and we say, you made the wrong judgment. Either you were too severe, which doesn't always happen, or you were too lax, or this is a really unique and thoroughly original, read, you're completely off the mark, state of difference. Like, go ask this candidate or pastor, can you tell us more your view about whatever part of the confession he disagrees with? So over the years, this has become an increasingly divisive thing within the PCA. Some people think it's overly restrictive. This year, we had ones related to pedo communion. So pedo communion is the belief that infants can, and young toddlers, people that have not professed faith, can take the Lord's Supper because they've been baptized. So do you think this is a view that the PCA embraces? No. Do you think a pastor can hold that view and be in the PCA?
No. Should not be able to.
Should not be able to, but does. Not allowed. So this one, we have differences that we all kind of we call standard on the days of creation. We're not going to get into all these, but days of creation, the Sabbath, second commandment things. Like we constantly talk about this stuff at Presbytery. We are well familiar with a lot of these things. We grant differences on those things. It's kind of agreed upon. We just want you to really work through. Tell me why you disagree. The pedo communion one, we do not. So you really, the debate now is, can you even have the view? It's pretty thoroughly been shown through RPR, and then the way the General Assembly votes is, no. Like if you have that view, you're really at odds with what we think the Bible teaches, what our confession teaches, and what our Book of Church Order teaches. And the view holding it itself probably means you shouldn't be in the PCA. So we still had some of those flagged where someone's like, oh, he stated a difference about communion, and he thinks kids can have it, but don't worry, he won't practice it. We're like, we want to actually go another step. Maybe he shouldn't be in the PCA. So that's what RPR does. It's important. I'm going to skip over this one. All right, overtures is basically we have overtures are requests for the General Assembly to do something. And we're going to go through some of what we did with this. But that's the simplest part of it. You can write an overture, present it to your session. The session can vote on it, which means they would take it as their own. They take that overture to the presbytery. The presbytery then decides whether or not to send it up to General Assembly. This sounds like the School of Rock. How does a bill get passed? I mean, this is the amount of scrutiny. So even at presbytery, your overture could, the committee for overtures at your presbytery could be like, we're going to tweak this a bit. We tweak it, and then we send it back up. General Assembly gets it, meets an overtures committee, which has a whole special rules. The rules don't apply to overtures committee. Everybody else, they have to have like these really important set of rules. Overtures has a whole section in our operating manual just for them. They get to do a way more power than the rest of these committees. They can change all sorts of things and then present it to the assembly to vote on. Just by way of this, once they vote on it, nothing happens if it's related to our Constitution, like our Book of Church Order, because it requires 2/3 of the presbyteries to approve. So if you were to read something like when I'm going to send out, there's several. We are constantly updating our Book of Church Order. Whenever those happen, like if you see something like, oh, this is ridiculous, I can't believe they would approve this change. I can't even think of a good example of what that would be. No, actually. It still has to go to the presbyteries, and then 2/3 have to approve it. After those 2/3 approve it, it's still not done. It has to come back to the next General Assembly, and the very first thing we do on opening night is vote whether or not to ratify it. So there have been overtures in our history that have gone through that whole process, got into General Assembly the next year, and failed to vote to ratify, and then it doesn't happen. So this is a pretty extensive process, and you can do overtures for all sorts of things. You can ask for a study committee, you can ask for changes to the BCO, you can ask for statements, you can ask for inquiries, all sorts of things. So then we're going to move on to one more thing and then circle back to overtures. The permanent committee reports are all of our committees that we reviewed. M&A, MTW, all those, they give us reports to tell us how they were doing. So this year there were some ones that drew big eyebrows. Not RUF this year. That was last year. RUF, we wanted to review so Reformed University Fellowship has had a recent change in their operating manual and how they do calls. So one of the beautiful things about RUF is each campus minister is ordained. So there's been, though, a history of who does he work for? Does he work for RUF or does he work for the presbytery? Because technically, from the church, it's a board of our church. The presbytery thinks he works for the presbytery. Sometimes, not always, RUF has felt like, well, he works for RUF, and it's like almost a dual call. So RUF wanted to change some of the way they send ministers and how they remove them. And why this became important was they changed the language of removal so that it made it sound like they can just remove a man from campus ministry and not inform the presbytery. The reason presbyteries got mad is there were 2 examples that year of that happening that had to do with abuse or sexual impropriety between a minister and a student. RUF had a compelling case. We need to sometimes act like they can't be around the students anymore. They should be rightly fired. But the presbytery says, we agree, but it's also our call then to, like, we should charge him with, failure to, breaking the 6th commandment or something. I mean, the 7th commandment. You can't just, we need something because we don't want men to then just be fired and escape church discipline. We came to a wonderful compromise last year. And so then this year, the report was a lot less intense. There was one that was extremely intense, and I think it's worth talking about. That's Mission to North America. So all of our church planning, all of our local outreach, it's a big group. There was intense debate about Mission to North America this year for 2 reasons. One was budgetary, and the other was the guy who currently heads it, a teaching elder named Erwin Ince. And they're related. So they had a $2 million shortfall in their budget this year. And when asked about it, nobody could give us a very good explanation of why we were that short. And then on top of that, they asked for more money for 2026.
Read the room, guy.
Read the room. So that wasn't great. And we also have this vision to plant 1,000 churches by the year 2033. We would have to plant almost 100 a year. This year we planted not even close to that. And so there's some concerns about the management of Mission North America, which led to the guy heading it up. So the way this works is when you are a head of a committee, your job gets voted on twice every General Assembly. And it's always 1-year renewals. So this is, you can imagine, potentially awkward. Most of the time a committee head, it's just, oh, he's done a great job, approve, no discussion. When there's an issue, your committee of commissioners gets to debate your job, often in front of you, or you have to leave because they're in executive session and then be called back in for them to question you. So that happened to Erwin Ince during the M&A committee meeting. It was voted 29 for, 26 against to recommend that he keep his job. 3 votes. When he got to the floor of General Assembly, the debate went on again, and it was 62% voted that he could keep his job, 38% voted that he should be let go. During the General Assembly vote, we don't go into executive session. So I do want to commend, how would you feel having over 2,200, and let me tell you, we were all there for this one, 2,200 men debate you in front of you. He has to stand there or sit while all the floor debates are going on, and then he can be asked questions, so he has to get back to the podium. So while there may be serious questions about his competency in management, his character shone through. He didn't make faces. He didn't get angry, especially at some really pointed questions. I mean, he really handled himself very well, and so he's got another year. And I really encourage you all to pray for his success. M&A is one of our most important committees. It is tasked with church planning. It assesses church planners. The way we have continued to grow is from church planning. So we want somebody that can definitely handle and manage the position really, really well. Wow, I have talked a lot. Okay, We're going to go through just a few of these overtures because some of them may make news. And I'm actually going to start in reverse order. This is related to things we've recently discussed in our confessions class, but is everyone familiar with the term Christian nationalism? Great. So we're going to start with this. Can somebody define Christian nationalism? Right. So we had, I think it was 4 requests to form a study committee on Christian nationalism, and then a request for us to make a statement regarding it. And that was to try to actually we don't like doing study committees because we have to pay for them, and we have to pay for them after we've approved the budget. So we have to come up with money to fund them. Because when we do these committees, we sometimes pay experts to weigh in on this. Hey, we vote on, the moderator gets to appoint who serves on these committees. So Christian nationalism may have a very broad definition. And that is a very good point. So one of the most outspoken guys for not doing the study committee, his argument was, before the General Assembly, that this was the big thing. There was a survey done, I think it was by CNN, about Christian nationalist beliefs, and 3 overwhelmingly African-American denominations got labeled Christian nationalist. And you chuckle because the association is usually with a different representation of the political spectrum, and by that I even mean color. What changed some of our minds, because we did vote to approve the study committee and we adopted a statement. So what changed our minds? While this may be a tough definition that various people could have a different understanding of what this is, one of the authors of the study committee is from a Presbyterian Texas, and he did a lot of good work. He contacted me to talk about it, and he contacted lots of other guys. He is from a very more conservative end of the PCA, and probably, just guessing, he's very politically conservative. And he was pretty much pleading for us to do this because he was having, and several of our Texas presbyteries have been having, issues with young men coming in full of zeal for seemingly the Lord, but getting into churches and quickly trying to advocate for very strong political stances, and then not even just political stances. So they very quickly start to argue that the church should make statements that mixed race marriages are sinful. They quickly will say, you need to take a stance against the Jews because they're running the world. You need to take a stance against not having black elders because they're inferior. Okay, so that's the sin of racism, that's the sin of kinism, and that's the sin of anti-Semitism. And that anti-Semitism is a sin. You're denigrating a person, group, based on just their ethnicity and perceived conspiracies against whatever. It has wreaked havoc in some of our churches. So we want a study committee to give, as best as we can, a definition of what this might be, as far as the PCA's understanding of it, address how to handle tough pastoral situations like the young 20-year-old who's been discipled more by online influencers than his local congregation. And that's pretty much what they'll do. So they'll spend about a year crafting this. The moderator gets to appoint. Our moderator has written about this. I think he can appoint himself, but the word on the street is he won't because it looks like poor form. We will probably ask for other people not in the PCA who are experts on Christian political thought or theology to also be part of this committee. That's within their power. And they'll come back to us next year with a study report that we'll vote on. Nothing happens really with this. So this is another thing. Study reports are just, we say, that was a great job. And now we have a resource, but that's it. So we voted to approve this. The guy that I told you about at the beginning, who was very against it because he couldn't define it, he gave a very passionate speech about why he changed his mind. And part of it had to do with other darker elements that are coming into PCA churches. So then we approved a statement. We have now joined 2 other of our sister denominations in NAPARC, the North American Presbyterian and Reformed Council or something. That is the Associate Reformed Presbyterian Church and the Reformed Presbyterian Church in North America. Both adopted a statement written by a man in the Associate Reformed Presbyterian Church. So this is the statement that we adopted. That the 52nd General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in America does hereby join with the Associate Reformed Presbyterian Church's 221st General Synod and with the Reformed Presbyterian Church in North America's 193rd Synod in condemning without distinction any theological or political teaching which posits a superiority of race or ethnic identity born of immutable human characteristics, and does call to repentance any who would promote or associate themselves with such teaching, either by commission or omission. So we could have made our own statement. We thought that was a pretty good statement, and it served the need of saying, all right, we're going to really investigate this, guys. But here, we recognize it's so urgent, we're going to speak to it right away. We did this in 2019 at the height of the Revoice scandal in our church about human sexuality. We voted to approve a study committee that we would write about human sexuality. It's one of the best study committees we've ever had. We also adopted the Nashville statement because we felt like, hey, we want to equip churches. We see this as an issue, so that's what we're doing. Those were like news outlets report on those. That's why I'm doing that. Let's see. I'm probably not going to get to too many more, so I'm just going to stop and answer questions if there are any.